Well, that was a tremendously kind and moving introduction. I'm grateful to have the chance to spend some time with you. I know Ann is as well. I think I lost the coin toss, so I'm going to speak first. And I'll try to do that very briefly because I'm as eager to hear from Ann as you are. So we're each here to talk about a book, and I think in many respects our books are radically different from one another. You can buy a copy of each one when we're done, and you can make up your own mind. But I actually think that the books are quite complementary, and that each in its own way affirms the message or purpose of the other one. My book's called Breach of Trust, and the basic point of Breach of Trust is to suggest that the relationship between the U.S. military and American society, and I think Justin just alluded to this, that basic relationship is pervaded by dishonesty. That rhetorically, we all support the troops. But in practice, collectively, we allow the troops to be subjected to serial abuse as authorities in Washington commit the troops to needless and unwinnable wars. This is an example, I think, of what the martyr and theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer once referred to as cheap grace. Cheap grace is grace that is unearned and undeserved, and that, in essence, turns a blind eye towards things that are fundamentally wrong or even evil. Now, my book it's a kind of a history book in a way. It's a history book in the sense that it tries to recount the changes in our basic military system that have occurred since Vietnam and evaluates the consequences of those changes. And the big change, of course, is one that occurred right at the end of the Vietnam, and that was the creation of the so-called all-volunteer force, which, despite that phrase, we should think of as a professional army, or to use the phrase that the founders of this republic would have used, a standing army. By and large, it seems to me our fellow citizens today view the creation of the all-volunteer force as having been a good thing. Certainly, the creation of the all-volunteer force, as a result of it, our reliance on professional soldiers has had the effect of relieving citizens of any responsibility to contribute to the nation's defense. And it has, in fact, lifted a burden from us as citizens. But one of the consequences of lifting that burden from us as citizens has been to give Washington a free hand in deciding when and where to commit U.S. forces. The American people effectively have forfeited ownership over what used to be called the American Army, and that army has now become Washington's army. But in their use of that army, civilian and military elites in Washington have proven to be both reckless and incompetent. The world's best military, certainly we're told we have the world's best military, and by many measures there's no question that we do have the world's best military. The world's best military is supposed to win wars, and indeed it's supposed to win wars quickly and decisively. The end of the Cold War, along with Operation Desert Storm back in 1991, bred that expectation of a military that would win quickly and decisively. But events since those days, particularly events since 9/11, have told a radically different story. We know how to start wars, but based on the evidence presented in Afghanistan and Iraq, we don't know how to win them. We don't even know how to end them. Once begun, wars tend to drag on indefinitely. And it's important, I think, for us to recognize and acknowledge the extent to which the American people are complicit in this outcome, in this tendency. Because the American people now have de facto defined their own involvement in American wars in terms of what in the book I refer to as the 3 no's. And the first no is that we will not change. That is to say, we will not change the way we live our lives simply because the nation is at war. And we will not pay. That is to say, we will not change our way of life, raise our taxes, reduce our entitlements in order to ensure that the revenues are provided to sustain the war conducted in our name. And of course, we will not bleed. Put simply, war has become not our problem, it's become somebody else's problem. Now, as a consequence of that, as a consequence of losing control of our military, as a consequence of indulging in the 3 no's, what we've ended up with is too much war and too few warriors. 1% of the population bears the burden of what has become, for all practical purposes, permanent war. And the other 99% of us are spectators. I personally believe that this distribution of service and sacrifice is not democratic. It's also not moral. It is, in fact, the inverse of the complaint registered by the Occupy movement of a couple of years back. Namely, what we have is the 1% being exploited by the 99%. The side effects are likewise unfortunate. The disparity between Washington's appetite for war and society's willingness to provide warriors has created an opening for profit-minded private security firms, a better term is mercenaries, to enrich themselves even as they promote pervasive waste and corruption. Now let's acknowledge that war has always been a money-making opportunity for some. But we live in a time when, in many respects, war has primarily become an opportunity for some institutions and some people to make money. President Obama and his administration have at least partially grasped the problem. The president's administration has tacitly acknowledged that in invading and occupying countries to transform them is a fool's errand. After flirting with counterinsurgency and nation building during the Obama Afghanistan surge, it has devised an alternative way of war. Missile-firing drones and special operations forces provide the basis for waging what is in effect a campaign of targeted assassination. This Obama approach has reduced costs, but it cannot provide a basis for coherent strategy. The Obama doctrine, furthermore, sets precedents that may yet turn the world into a free fire zone. I think that there is an alternative to the all-volunteer or professional military that we have come to accept. And the alternative that I believe we should be talking about and considering is a program of national service. National service could provide a way to revive the tradition of the citizen soldier while also enriching the reigning concept of citizenship. National service means that all young Americans would spend a period of service to community and country. Some young Americans would serve in the armed forces. Others would serve in different capacities, preserving the environment, helping the elderly and the dispossessed, improving the community in various capacities. But all would serve. That said, implementing a program of national service requires that we, the people, first recognize how defective the military system is that we've come to rely on. And with that, I'll sit down and be more than happy to turn the podium over to Ann. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to our hosts. I'm very happy to be here this evening and very honored